Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Aquil Jackson, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Athletes Unplugged. Today's guest is a guy I've wanted to join this show for a very long time now. His name is Mikey Taylor. He was a pro skateboarder for over 2 decades. He went on to become a serial entrepreneur. He has his VC firm called Commune Capital. And he also, while he was a skateboarder, but he was able to, along with some friends, create this beer company, St. Archer, which we'll talk more about it. But before Mike, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for spending the time and just to talk with me. And I'm very excited to have you on.
Thank you, big dog. I'm stoked to be here too.
So we spoke briefly before we started shooting here, but I have to tell you before we get started, when I grew up in Florida, and one of my best friends in elementary school was a sponsored BMX rider. So he kind of, I was into the BMX riding, and it kind of segued into skateboarding. Now, I'm not going to say I was a skateboarder, but I have one by my side here, and I always kind of dabbled with it growing up. So my biggest question to you is, okay, a guy from Southern California, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what you're doing now, I want to start how does a guy that picks up a skateboard as a teenager, right, become this like pro skater? I know there's a big gap, but was there like a pocket of skaters where you grew up was like, oh man, these guys are really good. You guys got to check these guys out. Like, how does a hobby become a thing where you think that you could potentially do this for a living?
It's a good question. So there was something that happened that made this possible for me. And my parents just decided to move to this random city. And so I started skateboarding in a town called Agora. They moved to this city, Thousand Oaks, Newbury Park. And for whatever reason, in this little community that was small, there were phenomenal skateboarders. I don't know why. It makes no sense. But I met these kids. And for the first time, I saw people doing what I saw in the videos and the movies in real life. I was blown away by it. And so when I saw that, a couple things happened. One, I realized that it was possible to do what the pros were doing. And two, I was surrounded by people that were so good, and just that competitive spirit of just friends. I wanted to be as good as them. And then what ended up happening is, out of my friends that were maybe like 10 guys, 7 of us went pro. That doesn't happen. I mean, you know this, right? It's like you grow up with friends and maybe one of them goes pro, So there was something in the water out there. It was crazy.
Wait, right? Okay. So all these guys go pro. Right. That is unreal. Because in the community where I grew up, there was only one other guy from my community to make the pro level. And you're talking about 7 guys that you skated with growing up. That's unreal.
I mean, well, my friends from high school, like our boys, we started traveling the world together. Like it was like the special homie thing turned into a career for all of us. And we're in Germany, we're in France. We're like, it was crazy. And it wasn't entourage. Wow. Every single one of us were paid, became pro, All
right. So, okay. So I guess growing up and these guys go pro, so I read someplace at the age of 18 or so, you got your first sponsor and you were actually thinking about going to law school, and you met a guy, I think his name was Josh Layden, and you guys he had, I guess, filmed this movie, Union Express, that was one of your favorite surfing movies. And you guys decided to recreate that from a skateboarding perspective. And so I guess my question is, in the mix of all of this, like how does that happen, man? Like how does one lead to, then you segue that into beer and a conversation, and how does that kind of unfold, man? Because I look at skateboarding, and correct me if I'm wrong, back when I feel like you were one of the first iterations of skateboard, and now into skateboarding, guys like Nigel Houston and Hog, these guys have cracked the code, right? But when you were coming through the pipeline, there was a different roadmap for you guys, right?
Yeah. So good. I'll start from the beginning.
There's so much. There's so much to unpack there.
Skateboarding when I started was so small. It was so like fringe and niche that being a pro skateboarder wasn't really a thing. You couldn't make a lot of money. So I never thought that was really an option for me. I always thought I was going to go to law school. I figured I'd be a lawyer because I loved arguing with people. It made no sense, but whatever, that's what I thought. And I got the opportunity to start traveling with my friends. This is right out of high school, right? And at that time, what happened was the Tony Hawk video game started going nuts. And then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to dress and look like skaters, even if they didn't skate. And so our industry just exploded. So my generation was able to ride this wave of our industry growing. And then we started making more money. And then, 10 years later, you have the, Nyjah Houstons and the Zions and these guys who came up in just a different world of skateboarding. We're in the Olympics. So, when I was young, it wasn't planned out, man. I was obsessed by this thing and I didn't want to let it go,
Yes. So I know I'm just trying to draw some parallels between my introduction from college to the pro level. Like I had to go out and get an agent. I had to go out and get someone to represent me. Was it similar when you were coming up? Like, hey, I have these people that want to sponsor me. Is there a middleman or a buffer to kind of say, hey, okay, this is a good deal. This isn't a good deal. Did you have an agent or what did that landscape look like?
Yeah. So with skateboarding, it's all DIY. You do it all yourself. And so what I did was there were skateboard magazines, right? And every once in a while, when a company would be running an ad, they'd leave an address in the corner. And so I went through the magazine and anyone who had an address, I took that address and I made a little sponsor me tape, right? This was a long time ago. So it was VHS. And I sent out 40 tapes of me skateboarding to every company that had an address and just put attention team manager. And then I ended up getting calls, like a couple calls back. And then it became my job to negotiate with them on what I was hoping for. And so I went my whole kind of entry into skateboarding, just, rolling the dice, ended up like finding a way in, negotiated all of my deals moving forward, So for us, it's like, we don't have coaches, we don't have agents. It's a very much like, watch how it's done and then figure out how to do it like them. And then, ultimately try to improve on it.
Wow. So I would imagine you would probably have to have a really good support team around you. What part did your parents play in all of this? Because I would imagine that wasn't, do you have any siblings or was it like, hey, mom and dad, I want to become a professional skateboarder. Okay, you got full autonomy. We're going to support you. I would imagine they were a big part of this because, as you said, you're an independent contractor. And again, I'm trying to draw parallels between what I did for a living. We're independent contractors, but we're within a team and an organization. So there's an organizational standpoint that's there. Yeah. So I would imagine so there's a name that stands out to me, and I'm jumping around a bit, but you have an amazing career skateboarding, and you meet a guy which was probably one of my favorite shows to watch, Rob and Big. And I read someplace that you were one of the original Street League members. Is that right?
I was, yeah. My story with Rob goes way, way back, actually. I met Rob when I was 16, when I was a kid, way before I was a pro skateboarder.
Is he that high energy, he seems to be, to me, he's a brilliant guy. Just watching, just from his show, like he would come up with an idea and he would go for it. Yeah. And it was so inspiring as a young person to watch it and to watch how he was fearless, man, absolutely fearless. And he's been a huge, with DC Shoes and all the different business ventures he's been a part of. I mean, the guy's killing it. He's crushing it, always working. I guess my question to you is, throughout your career, and I think a lot of people, again, I'm trying to draw parallels between the two of our, past sports, from a business standpoint, right? When did you realize, hey, this is what I love to do. I'm passionate about skating. When did you realize, like, okay, this is something that I need to start preparing myself for life after? Was it the guy, a name that comes to mind is a guy named Randy, who you've talked about in some of your platforms you spoke about. You had a guy that really kind of, sell you on the fact that, okay, this finance thing, you're not making a ton. Well, at the beginning, but how do we monetize this? How do we save? How do we prepare for life after the skateboard?
Yeah, that's right. So A few things. One, for you, I imagine when your parents found out that you were going to play pro ball, they were probably really stoked, right? That was a celebration moment, right?
Yes, because there was an end game. The NFL was like an end game, right? Right.
Yeah,
It was something to look forward to.
yeah. For me, when I told my parents I was going to be a pro skateboarder, full panic, full blown panic. They were like, absolutely not. You were going to college. This is just a hobby. And
Right.
look, I wasn't willing to give up on it. And I have this gift of just like being relentless and persuasive, right? So I'm just on them like, no, I want to do this. I want to do this. Finally, they agree, but there was kind of one stipulation, and that was that I had to connect with their friend who was managing my parents' money. And my parents, like my dad's a photographer. My dad was didn't make crazy money, but we did well enough to not have to worry about like putting food on the table, right? So I meet this guy at 19. This is Randy, and he was the one that just started teaching me about money. Started teaching me about the easy stuff, right? Like how to create a budget, how to create a plan, how to invest, and I think it was a combination between him and then Rob was actually like incredibly influential in my career. And that was because I met him prior to all of this. I met him when I was 16. And I was always attracted to the skaters who were doing other things, right? It was like Jamie Thomas, huge influence of mine. Rob Dyrdek, huge influence of mine. Anyone who was a skater that owned a business, I was just attracted to those type of people. And Rob, when I was 18, 19, figure out I'm going to be pro. I'm sitting in a van with him in Reno. And, we're talking about skaters doing tricks and blah, blah, blah. And he looks at me and he goes, Mikey, I'm gonna leave you with something right now. And if you actually run with this, you're going to have a great career. If you don't listen to me, though, you're going to be like everyone else. And I'm like, okay, what is it? And he goes, he goes, all right, look, every pro skateboarder is just looking at what they can do right now. It's all about the moment, right? I want you, when you're going to make decisions, when you're thinking about doing tricks, I want you to think 10 years out. How do I put myself in a position to be here 10 years? Right. And that was huge for me. So two things happened just from that one, you
didn't have to listen. Most guys, it goes over most guys' heads. I've been in that same boat.
I took its truth, man. I was like, okay. And this is kind of what happened. One, I started looking at ways to keep myself here a long time. The second thing is I knew this thing was going to end. And so what Rob was telling me about how to basically maneuver through the skate industry, what Randy was telling me on how to prepare myself financially so that I'm in a position when it ends to be okay, it was the perfect combination of two people coming together that really made an impact on my life. And then now with Rob, it's like, I'm just chasing this dude, man. It's like, I'm just trying to get to where he's at, and he just keeps making these freaking leaps, and
The guy seems like a human generator.
Rob's a good one, man. He what you see is what you get. If you haven't met him, the day you do, you're going to enjoy it.
Oh, I would love to meet that guy. I would absolutely love to meet him. Just to pick his brain, just to be a fly on the wall, just hear his pitches. I've heard his pitches.
You've heard about his pitches before, right? Because they're one of a kind.
I've heard about it. It's just so inspiring, and there's no coincidence he had a show that inspired a generation of people like myself sitting on the couch who's a professional football player. Hey, I'm gonna go pick my skateboard up and go outside and see if I can ollie on the curb. When I have my next door neighbor looking at me, he's a teammate of mine, thinking I'm crazy as hell for doing this. I get so that prompt, because I know you made some investments while you were still skating, and one being the storage unit, right? And that falls under that category of commune capital, right? Like you started investing in storage units, which ultimately, grew into multifamily homes and different investments. And now your IG account at Mikey Taylor, you take us through a tutorial of just information that most people, like I said earlier, it would go over most people's head, but you're able to articulate it and dumb it down so the casual person can understand finance at the smallest degree.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's because I'm a skater and I had to understand it in a way that like made sense, which means dumb this thing down. But yeah, look, when I started investing, it was in the beginning not that sexy. My first plan was I needed cash reserves. I needed to have enough money in case something happened, right? That's not sexy. Once I got to that point, I started investing in like, retirement accounts. I started investing in stocks and bonds, all the basic stuff, mainly because I wasn't able to invest in real estate yet. I just didn't have enough. And then once I got to the point of, having a big enough investment to make, I started investing in storage units. I started participating on the debt side of real estate. So acting as the bank and financing other people's real estate. And the thing I liked about real estate as a skater was it provided what I was really looking for, right? I was young, and because I was young, I wanted to grow my wealth, right? But also, I was relying on all of my income coming from my sponsors. And my perspective of that was my sponsors own me. They own all the control to my future. And I didn't like that. And so when I started investing in real estate, it was like, okay, the real estate can appreciate, which grows my wealth, and it pays me cash flow, which takes control away from the sponsor. Right. And it was just this, like, I had one of those aha moments. It was like, oh my gosh, if I get more of that, it doesn't matter if my sponsors leave me. They could leave me in the dust if I could rely on the income from this. And, it was freeing once I realized it. And then all my energy went towards how do I get more of it?
Right. It seemed like you had a very good, mentor, and Rob and some other guys that I've read about that had a huge influence on your skating career and some of the decisions you've made off the board.
Yeah.
I guess my next question kind of falls into, what in that skating community, right? And I go back to my locker room when I was in the locker room. Out of 50 some odd guys in the locker room, there may be about 10 guys who are in the huddle talking about business, talking about different ventures that they're into. And it's almost like you're the outcast. Was it similar in the pro skating career where guys could only, you mentioned it earlier, guys could only see what was in front of them. Yeah. And I feel like you were like a diamond in the rough, man. And you love what you do, but also you got to understand at a certain point, you won't be able to do this all your life. You're doing something that's highly risky. And so I guess my question is, was there a huge community of guys who had to push back on some of the things that you were involved in? If I'm a sponsor, I want you to eat, sleep, and shit skateboarding. And I don't want you to do anything else. Did you ever feel that from your sponsors? Some pushback, like, wait a minute, you're doing too much. I don't know if you're all in or not.
Yeah. So the pushback didn't come till later, and was more of a function of this type of stuff, entrepreneurship, investing, finance. You don't talk about that in skateboarding, like zero, off limits, right? So I had one close friend of mine, Paul Rodriguez, and it was him and I would always talk about this stuff behind the scenes. But like when I was in the industry with friends, dude, it was nothing, right? When I started getting pushback is when we started St. Archer, the craft brewery. And, the big kicker was I had sponsors that were like, why do you keep wearing St. Archer? Like, you need to wear our stuff. Right?
Oh, I see.
So that was where I started getting some pushback. But when my career ended, then I went all in on basically, you know what? Why am I so concerned about what my community thinks about finance? Like, if I'm embarrassed to talk about it, that means none of us get better. That means the door is always going to be closed for us to prepare financially. And I was like, shit, man, I'm just going to jump out. Screw it. I have no sponsors I need to rely on. Now it's just my ego. And let's freaking put this thing in check and try to do some good. And man, I'll tell you, when I started talking about money, that's when the punches started coming. It was, I thought it was going to be rough. I didn't realize it was going to be like that. I became like villain number one for easily 3 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my, was this towards the later part of your career, you're saying, right? Was this right after? So you started St. Archer after you had surgery and you didn't have any more sponsors?
We started St. Archer. I was still skating.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so we started St. Archer. We came up with the idea of 2011. We opened doors in 2012. We sold it at the end of 2015, and then my career ended in 16. So end of St. Archer was really close to the end of my career.
So
And I wasn't talking about money at all, right? Like one thing that I remember happened was with St. Archer, when we sold it, it was so public that I remember being terrified that I couldn't maintain this separation anymore. Like, holy shit, everyone's gonna know now. And I remember I went to skate a demo in Texas. It was Make-A-Wish Foundation, right? And we had sold the company 3 months prior. I walk in, the announcer, right? As I go in, goes, Mikey Taylor in the building, newest millionaire, sold St. Archer for, and I was just like,
awesome.
Oh my gosh, it was like the lights went out on me. I was so freaked out by it. Yeah, it's just like, dude,
that's so odd. That's so odd. The minute you step into the National Football League, everyone through Google, if you have a phone or a computer, you can find out exactly what everyone's making. So that whole idea of telling, family members and friends, no, I don't have it. No, that's out of the water. You got to come up with a different strategy to say no. Right. So I get that. I get that part. I really do.
That's right.
So let's talk about the sponsors. You talk a lot about the sponsor. Yeah, you talked a little bit about the sponsor. Was that, man, it's just so much. Was it difficult to, once you got sponsors, was there a roadmap of, like, early on when you started pro skating, was there a roadmap of, okay, you need to go to this event? Were they kind of dictating like which events you would go to? Because if I'm not mistaken, you were more of a street skater than a contest skater, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We had requirements. It was, we had a certain amount of demos and tours that we had to go on. We'd have a certain amount of ads and
So you're doing ads. So in a calendar year, if you're not practicing, how often would you be at an event, or like what does that look like? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was probably gone 5 months of the year. In probably like two week increments. And, a lot of times it was filming, right? Like our whole career was built around these video parts, and a video part would come out every 2 or 3 years. And it was only like a 3-minute video. But with skateboarding, if you were going to film a trick, you had to film a trick that had never been done on the spot you're skating. So after a while, it got so hard to figure out a new trick to do. So a lot of times it would take us 2 to 3 years to film 3 minutes, right? That's insane.
Wow.
But that's what it would take.
Wow.
So a lot of the trips we went on were film trips. So we would go to Spain for 2 weeks to film. We go to, Germany for 2 weeks to film. We go to China. So that was a big part of the trips we were on.
Wow. Damn, I didn't know that, man. That's a huge commitment. That's a huge commitment for something that, and when you started skating, you don't really know, no one knows you're going to be the next Tony Hawk or this next breakthrough athlete. You're doing it merely out of passion. And that's one thing that I realized when I started following you on Instagram, the passion that you speak with in terms of finance, in terms of business. A lot of athletes, professional athletes, I feel like you cracked the code in a sense of, and I remember when I retired, I told my wife specifically, I want to do something I'm passionate about doing because I'm a process guy. I'm a process guy. And if I enjoy it and I'm passionate about it, then all those intangibles that I learned from that allowed me to have a successful career, I want to apply that to my next thing. When you decided to, when you didn't have any sponsors and you decided, you know what, I'm going commune capital, I'm going entrepreneurship, I'm doing this full time. Yeah. What was that transition like for you? Even though you had some things kind of set up for you, but I would imagine it was still difficult to step away from something that you had done for most of your life. Yeah.
I'll start with this. I'm very similar to you. If I am into something, I am a freaking savage. I will outperform until I do. If I'm not into it, I am terrible. It's like I'm two different people. So I have to be all in on something. For me, when my career ended, it was like I knew it was going to be hard, right? I definitely knew it was going to be hard. I was not prepared for how hard it was, though. I had this idea that if I cracked the code financially and I didn't have to rely on income, then it was going to be easier.
I don't mean to cut you off, but that's where I really, from a mental standpoint, because at a certain point in my career, through a mentor of mine, we had he was asking me, I signed my second contract for the Cleveland Browns. And it was around 2012. And I was at a wedding, which now my wife, her best friend was getting married, and her father, we were playing a round of golf. And he was asking me all these financial questions that I couldn't answer. I was like, I felt comfortable enough with him. It was like, you know what? I don't know. I have no idea. Not knowing what he had done for business, not knowing, all I knew is he could afford a hell of a wedding in Turks and Caicos. And when we got back to DC, he was like, hey, you seem like a sharp guy. You just don't know what you don't know. So I have some people I want you to meet. It was his financial managers. Had a meeting with them, and my knowledge of finance and how money works just completely took me to another level. So get back to the point we're talking about. So when I decided to retire, in my mind, because I was financially set, I wasn't going to have my transition would be a little smoother, and it wasn't, because you remove something that you're so passionate about and all the qualities that we just spoke about. I want to apply that someplace else. And I was completely just stuck mentally. I was in a fog, and it was tough.
Yeah. 1000%. I spent a lot of time thinking about this too. This is kind of where I've landed on it. If I were to pick, am I going through my transition financially free, or am I going through my transition not? I'm going to pick financially free. Right. But this is kind of, what I realize. If you're in survivor mode, right? Income's gone, and you got to figure out how to keep food on the table. You don't have time to necessarily go through the mental struggle you're going through. It's just go get this mission done. Right. What being financially free allowed me to do was realize all of these insecurities and challenges within myself that I didn't even realize were there. Right. Like I viewed myself as a pro skateboarder first and foremost. I am built and put on this planet to be a skater. Right. That was my identity and my purpose. And when that went away, I lost all the ability to figure out if I knew what I was supposed to do in a good manner or not. Right. It was just like, I no longer knew the game I was playing. And what I'm thankful for is I had that year of feeling like shit, not knowing what I'm supposed to do. And I was able to basically be brought to my knees in a blessed position and go, I need to figure this out. I need help. I need to do this. That wasn't easy. It wasn't at all. But what it did was then became one of the biggest blessings that ever happened, right? Like skateboarding career ends, I view it as the most painful part of my life. Fast forward to now, I'm so thankful it happened, because now I'm doing something in, life 2.0 that I'm equally as passionate about. I'm being more filled by it. I feel like I'm able to make a bigger impact, and this wouldn't have happened if it weren't for that,
Yeah. I'll never forget one of my mentors that I looked up to playing the game of football. He told me, you have to mourn. You have to let it. You have to go through that moment. No one else would be able to understand it other than people who was in it. You could talk to your wife. So I had to go out and seek professional help. I had to go out, and because that first year was rough. I couldn't watch football. I couldn't do it. Not that I when I would watch it, I thought I could still play. It was just I had to wrap my head around and convince myself I was done. Let's start moving forward. I didn't want to teeter around in that gray area. So I had to get professional help and saw a therapist and what have you. And luckily for me, I had a really good support team here in DC. A lot of my friends here don't have an athletic bone in their body. They're either government contractors or attorneys or what have you. So that transition was a lot smoother for me, even though from the outside looking in, you would have thought I was still the crazy, energetic person or what have you. But internally, I was going through a mental anguish. And so let's talk about some of the projects you've been involved with. You have a skateboarding company, Sovereign. Is that correct? Sovereign. You've been, you've had DC shoes. You've had a number of shoes. You've been involved in. So you were the easiest person to research in doing this, because you have so much going on. Like, what are some of your latest projects that you can talk about right now that you're really like, that you're really interested in?
So as far as my full time, like what I'm driving, Commune Capital is the only one. And that's more a function of it's harder than anything I've ever done. the ceiling is higher than anything I've ever done. And, the opportunity, my perspective of helping people understand finance, this is a massive problem. So it's taking, it's 95,
Right,
you know. But I am involved in some other things now, just as like a passive investor. When I have friends that are doing
right,
cool stuff,
right,
I'm able to help them build out that vision through an investment, and get to help
right.
build it from a marketing standpoint. Up
Yeah,
until
that's
now,
cool.
go ahead.
Yeah. How difficult was it to? I would imagine you have a team of people, right, that works under the umbrella of Commune Capital. How difficult was that? Because I feel like that's been my biggest issue of wanting to create a fund or a firm and trusting people that that are as equally committed, if not more committed, as I am. That to me is the biggest hurdle that I have to get over for my own right. How did you deal with that and approach it and get through it?
Yeah, it's such a good question, man. Such a good question. I was forced to figure it out from the behavioral side, because when I first wanted to start a company, I still had a pro career. And I either had to full-blown step away from my pro career to build a company, or I had to figure out how to put people in place so that I could do both. And it was
Right.
ultimately learning how to delegate. But you're talking about something even more difficult than just the idea of delegation, right?
Right.
If
Right.
you don't learn how to delegate, you'll never be able to build anything. That's just
Right. Right.
right?
Yeah.
But it takes a huge amount of trust. That's the thing that people don't tell you is very difficult. It also takes a component of humbling yourself in some regard and
Right.
letting go of control and giving that to somebody else, right?
Right. Right.
Where it really kind of took a change for me is when I realized what I was good at and what I am bad at. And the things I am
Right.
bad at, I cannot build a business if it's all relying on me, right? Like I am
Yes.
not,
Yes.
I'm not an operations person. I'm not like keep everything focused and moving forward, check, check, check. Not me, right? That's very, very
Right.
key when it comes to
Right.
business. So I think knowing that has always forced me to find those type of people. As far as finding ones
Right.
you trust, yeah, man, that's a little bit of that's a bigger challenge. I think for me, where I'm at now, I start with the person, I start with the character, I start with their morals, right? Like the skill set and what they're going out to help with, that has to be there. But what's
Right.
inside, what they're built upon, that doesn't.
Right.
And so
Right.
I kind of spend a lot of time just understanding them as a person, why they make decisions. If they have a family, what their
Yeah.
family life looks like. If they're a father or mother, what does that look like? How
Right.
do they
Right.
act under stress? Um,
Right.
and
Right.
I'm trying
You
to
basically
capture
want to know like the intrinsic, motivation of a
yeah,
person. And it's
yeah,
funny. I did an internship maybe a few years ago. A guy at DraftKings. It's called Drive by DraftKings. It was in
yeah.
Boston, and we had a chance to sit with top execs from Bain Capital, and
Mm,
it was interesting. I was able to walk away from that and get a lot of questions answered in terms of how someone at the professional level can add value to a company. And you hit it on the head. One of the execs were like, we don't invest. First of all, they only invest in rocket fuel, right? Let's state that. They only invest in rocket fuel, but they also invest in the person. Why are they motivated? What motivates them? So what I took away from that is all the investments. People. Some of my friends may think I'm crazy, but I'm not putting my money towards anything I'm not interested in. That I know that I cannot. If it fails, I know I won't allow it to fail. If I have my money towards, I love it that much because I'm more of a, in terms of a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of risk, I'm more of a like 6.5.
okay.
But I want it to be more of a risk taker. But for me, I need to educate myself and be more knowledgeable in that regard. And I think your page is so helpful, man. It really is. Things that I thought I knew, you give more clarity on it. And kudos for you for stepping out and actually diving in deep into it, because you don't manage a portfolio, people's portfolio. You manage, business assets and you're in charge of that in that space. So you're in a very unique space. And I think a lot of people listening and follow you. I think you're such in a unique space, man. And there's a lot of guys who have positioned themselves life after football, life after off the board, to have a successful career and build a legacy.
Hmm. Well, I want to highlight something you just said, because it's actually really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding your risk tolerance is massive, right? The fact that you know where you lie on a 1 to 10 risk tolerance is huge. The other thing, if you don't understand investment, you shouldn't make it. So you're actually sitting on like two
Right.
incredible principles. That's profound. I just want to highlight that. That's big.
Oh, listen. When we're done here, I definitely want to keep in contact with you, because I feel like I can learn a lot from you. And it's for me, I'll hear a pitch every day. If I get an email, hey, someone has a pitch, I don't turn anything down. I want to listen to it all, just to get a feel for all those things we just spoke about. But do you have any advice for me in terms of someone like I just made a big investment this past year I had an opportunity to invest in Instacart, and it's something my wife uses every day, all day, and so do I. And it was like, okay, this is a no-brainer. I mean, we bought high, but it was like a great intro into, kind of getting, putting one foot in the water and doing those different things. And I have a great team of people that manages our money, so we do well in that regard. But I've slowly but surely wanted to, take more of a risk. Here in DC, I don't know if you've dealt with it, but I don't know the proper term for it, but they haven't kicked anyone out in terms of like foreclosures. I don't know what that term is.
On real estate?
Yes, on real estate.
Yeah,
so there's going to be
their eviction moratorium still in play.
Yeah, the moratorium. You're right. So, there's going to be opportunities where, there's going to be opportunities, and I want to be on the front end of that in terms of, just extending that portfolio. You have any advice for me in that regard?
That's a good question, actually. I would say two things that I think are for you, but it's really for everyone. Make sure you always have cash available for opportunity, right? So what you're talking about is potentially seeing an opportunity in real estate. Well, you only get to participate if you have the cash to be able to do so. So that's important.
Right.
When it comes to real estate, my perspective has always been, is there demand for this product for 10 years? Do I have demand for this product for 10 years? I'm less focused on what's happening right this moment. I want to know that if I put my money into this investment, I'm going to be able to get the cash flow I need in rents, and that cash flow is going to continue for the next decade. And if it is, and you invest in the right deals and you don't over leverage, then if a downturn in the economy happens, it doesn't matter. So I'm a really big believer in, how do I make the most amount of return with, lowering the largest amount of risk in it? I love the risk adjusted return.
Right. It's fun. I want to read you a quote that I read from Shitmag magazine. You did an article with them, and you were quoted, and I love this. It was talking about the concept of money. You said it's a representation of your contribution to society. If you make somebody's life easier, more enjoyable, you can make money. I thought that was spot on, man. Because
you know what, man? I get so much shit for that, actually. That quote,
really?
I get so much shit for. Yeah. Look, I think the feedback let me start with this. Let me start with the positive. Why I like it is if you look at money through the lens of how can I add more value? How can I change people's lives? You're not focused on the money. You're focused on the delivery, and then the money is the outcome, right?
Right.
What people don't like about it is, they'll bring up a teacher. Well, what about a teacher? Do you think a teacher deserves to make, let's call it 60 grand a year when, Mikey or Quell making all this money as athletes? Where's the value add there, right? And I talk about this on social media a lot. I am not saying that being a teacher is not valuable. It is. It 1000% is. But you have to look at the amount of people that you're impacting in 1 year, right? How many kids do you impact in that year? 25, right? And then we have someone like you may be impacting millions in a year. right? So you have to consider scaling it. You look at Steve Jobs, man. You look at Elon. Like these dudes are impacting millions of people's lives in one swoop. It's like, that's why the money's more there. So if you are adding a lot of value to anybody who struggles with this concept, I think this is a good takeaway. If you are adding a lot of value to people's lives and you're not making a lot of money, look at how you can add more, how you can add that same value to more people, right? How do you get your message out on a wider net? You scale this thing, the money will come.
Right. Oh, no doubt. When I saw that, I was like, man, you said it in a nutshell. I really, truly feel like that. You know, I've been teetering in this space of, you know, when I retired, a lot of people are like, well, are you going to go into coaching? Are you going to do this? You're doing that. Like, I'm very emotional person. And you said something earlier when we were talking about, and I think we have a similar personality. Whatever I do, if I can't put my all into it, I won't touch it. I won't touch it because I just won't touch it because I don't want to see if it fails. I want to know it fails, given everything I possibly can give to it. It doesn't make any sense to teeter around with it if I'm not doing that. You know, it's how I, you know, was able to play 11 years in National Football League. It's just the way that's the way I'm made up.
Yeah, that's right.
Man, I just think it's so unique, and that model, in a sense, have made you successful. You know, do you actually have? Let me ask you this about the current state of skateboarding. Let me go back for a second. Are guys more educated on how to take care of their finances a little bit better now that you have guys who have cracked the code in terms of finance? And has that community kind of opened up and say, you know what, guys, the more people know about the ins and outs of sponsorships and how you guys aren't generating a ton of money, is it still considered taboo, or is this thing kind of blowing up in front of us?
You're starting to see it change. It's not fixed yet, but you're starting to see people mention it. And I think the big thing for me is like, I've been out of skateboarding now six years, right? And so when I talk about money, I can only get it down to a certain age limit, right? Like if I hit like a 25-year-old, I'm like, boom, this is huge. But what I'm starting to see is people in their 20, 21, 22 pro skateboarders then taking my content and then reposting it, right? And they have the ability to get it down to the youth that's going to get ahead of this thing. So kind of what I'm hoping, it's going to be more of that like Tupac approach, right? I don't know if like my message is going to be able to do all of the change, but I think I'm going to be able to impact enough people to where they go out and then they make the change, or then they influence the next generation to make the change. So hopefully I'll be a part of the bigger picture.
Yeah. So you speak about the bigger picture. Is there a union for skateboarders, or everyone is pretty much, you know, independent contractors? Because in my business, there's a union. There's certain things that like that is a huge part of it. And I feel like if that's something that ever, you know, comes to fruition, you could be one of those guys that can say, hey, listen, let's start a union. Let's make sure we're getting the best product and best sponsorship for our guys to protect our guys. And let's leapfrog this thing from a financial standpoint. Because what is a pro skater, what is he bringing in terms of a calendar year, in terms of finances? Is he cracking the six figures? And the top guys, do they crack the six? Or is it like, you know, in terms of football, is it like the quarterbacks making $30-40 million a year, and then the last guy on the totem pole is making $1 million? Is there a huge gap between the top guys and like the mid-level guy? Yeah,
there's a big gap. I would say if you average this thing out, or let's say this, let's separate in 90-10, right? 90% of pro skateboarders make, I don't know, 60-70 grand a year. That's most. Then you have a small percentage of that 10% that make, call it 150, right? And then you have 1% of that 10% that are making over $1 million.
Got it.
So like, this is a good one, right? Like for us, with what we do, we bring on investors to invest in our real estate projects with us, right? And as of right now, we can only have accredited investors. So if you're an accredited investor, it means you make, you know, an income, sole income of $200,000 a year for 2 years. If you're married, it's $300,000, or you have a net worth of $1 million, right?
Right.
There's only 13 pro skateboarders that I had the ability to talk to invest with us.
Wow.
Right?
Out of, you're talking about 13. 13 is a small number, regardless of how many guys there are.
Yeah, and here's another one. Out of that 13, only 3 qualified from net worth. The rest qualified from income.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. See, you know what that reminds me of? You know what that reminds me of this disparity between the NBA and the WNBA.
Yeah.
You have WNBA stars. It's that 1% that don't have to go overseas to play football or play basketball and generate that yearly income. And then you have a slew of the bigger percentage of the WNBA, they have to play year round. And what comes with that? You sacrifice family, you sacrifice relationships at home. You're too busy having tunnel vision to do something you absolutely love. I feel like a lot of people don't know. There's a skating community, and then there's people like myself who never had a chance to speak to a pro skater. I've never crossed paths with a pro skater to know any of the questions that I may have had, because I have my issues with the NFL and how they've conducted business, but it doesn't even compare to what you've had to overcome and what some guys are dealing with currently to this day.
Yeah. So I hear you on that. And look, is there, can we empower this group so that they understand their value to earn more? 1,000%. For me, what I'm thankful for is I had to figure out this path to financial freedom, not making a lot of money, right? Like when people hear me, they're like, oh, you're a pro skateboarder, dude. Of course you're able to figure out how to be financially free. It's like, we don't make enough, but what they don't realize is skaters don't make that much. So to be able to accomplish this on a salary that a lot of people make, not as pro athletes, I think that encourages people to know that it could be done. But to what you're saying, it's like, yeah, man, it's like, do most pros not realize the impact they make or the power they give to a company to be able to sell product? Yeah, I would say they don't. But in today's world, man, you have the ability to go straight to the source, right? If you have an audience, bypass everyone and sell something direct to them. It'll change everything, right?
Right.
So,
I think I think this younger generation, and you're not much older than I am, I think this younger generation is figuring it out. They're like right on the cusp of, you look at college football, they're starting to get compensated. And some of the following some of these kids have, walking into leaving college, if you were a pro player or, at one of these Power 5 conferences in college football, you're walking away with hundreds of thousands of followers. Now brands are coming to you, and so it's a different landscape, a different field these guys are dealing with, a lot different than when I was trying to get recruited, a lot different than how you got your start. It's just so fascinating. So I heard a funny story about, I was listening to one of the platforms you were on, you were talking about your royalties check. I think it was either from DC Shoes or something like that. You were in a contract dispute, and I heard this funny story about you throwing it in the corner someplace, and you realized it was a huge check. It was a royalties check or something like that. Can you walk me through that story?
Yeah. So I just got my first pro shoe from DBS. I had never gotten a shoe before. I didn't understand that the royalties you get with a shoe are so much bigger than everything else, right? And at the time, I got an offer to ride for another shoe company, and I was in this very unique window where my contract ended for DBS. I had a shoe that just dropped, and it got overlooked, and they didn't get my new contract signed, right? So I had a shitload of leverage on them, and then I get an offer from another company, and I'm like, yo, you guys got to pay me more or I'm out of here. And they're like, you can't screw us like this. We just dropped your shoe, right? And so we're negotiating back and forth for months, right? And I have a new contract showing up on my doorstep every 3 days. And it's just, I'm getting these things. I'm like, oh, this is so annoying. This is so annoying. One of them was a royalty check. I just didn't realize. It came in the same manila folder, right? And so I just throw it somewhere, being a punk kid. I end up signing the deal with them. Everything's good. 4 months goes by. I'm having like a party at my house, and somebody's sitting on my couch, and they're like, dude, you've got a bunch of crap under here. And they pull up this, UPS like little, package. And they're like, what is that? I'm like, oh, dude, that's just some contract stuff. You can throw it away. And like, really? This is a contract? Let's see what, they rip it open and they pull out 2 checks, right? And they're like, yo, Mikey, these are checks. I'm like, what?
Oh my God.
And they look like, dude, I pick them up. It's like, one was like a $15,000 check. The other was like a $45,000 check. And I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So that was my first taste of shoe royalty. Yeah. And I almost threw it away.
That's insane. I can tell you this. I almost threw it away. That would have been a hell of a. Oh my gosh! I'm glad your friend found it, and he was a loyal friend not to take it and run off and spend that money. That's right. That's dope, man. That's dope. So let me go back to. I want to switch gears for a second because anyone who knows me and when I played the game, like I was a fanatic with like investing in my body. Like I would try anything, hyperbaric chambers. I don't know if you ever heard of a hyperbaric chamber. So I had it all. I had a team of people working on my body. This may be a silly question, Mikey, but when you were a pro skater for over 2 decades, was that even in your realm of thinking is like how to taking care of your body? Or did you just like wake up, go skate, you get injured, you go doctor, you go get it taken care of? Was that a thing for pro skaters? Or if it was it ever a thing for you to take care of your body in that regard? Or am I just like...
No, you're spot on. It became a thing towards the tail end, right? Like the first 10 years, man, it was like, I'm just out here skating every day. Like that was it.
Right.
Towards the end, I was in this position where I was able to have enough demand for myself still to be able to sell product. I'm super competitive, so I wanted to be better and better. And I got to the point where like, dude, your body doesn't act the same as it did when you were a kid, right? Like you fall, it hurts more. And so for the last 5 years, I started working out with a trainer, which I didn't do prior, started changing the way I was eating, started doing the cryo freeze.
Cryotherapy. Yeah.
I did it all. And my whole goal was, how do I outperform these freaking kids at 30 years old with 2 kids? Like I'm exhausted all the time. What do I do? And so I started just paying more attention. And what's fascinating is my last video part, in my perspective, is one of my better video parts. And I think a lot of it just came down to me paying attention and taking care of myself.
So I saw a bit. That's great to know. I had no idea. It makes sense now. But you grew up in a different generation. Now I feel like
that's what Paul Rodriguez.
Yeah.
He's got all this stuff in his house. He's got a cryo chamber. He's got hyperactive. He is a freaking savage. He's just like you. He is a savage, and he's been a savage since day one. That's the crazy thing about Paul. He was ahead of the curve.
That's insane. That's insane. I was so fascinated by that, man, because I feel like nowadays everyone has if you want it, you can find it. In terms of health and all that good stuff. I had another question. I just lost my train of thought. You were saying something about crap.
Health, paying attention, kids being exhausted.
Yeah. It's just so I saw a video of you, I think it was the X Games. And when I first started the research, I'm like, wait, this dude looks like an attorney on a skateboard. You don't have no tattoos. You didn't have the long hair. You had the nice comb over. I'm like, this dude doesn't even look like in my mind, I was like, this isn't what a pro skater that skates for 20 years looks like. I'm like, that was insane. But like, I just, I look at you as one of those like unicorns in the sport, man, that a lot of people need to highlight and bring attention to this. Man, I think it gets overlooked. I think it's in a small community of people. And on my platform, if I could, put it out there, I will, man, because I enjoy it. Like literally, I think this weekend I'm going to go. There's a skate park like a quarter mile away from my house that I need to go out there when there's no one out there. The little kids got to take it over, and I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to be some YouTube sensation of me breaking both my legs and arms, 38-year-old not being where he's supposed to be. But
go in the mornings.
That's great, man. You got any questions for me? Anything that you're curious about in the football world, or how finance kind of works? Because I know the number one thing about which NFL players get a bad rap of finances, right? There's like this curve of, within the first 5 years, guys go broke. And there is no, I wish I had a crystal ball to say, hey, this is why it's happening. And I think, again, we talked about a lot of parallels between our communities and just the way of thinking about money. In my personal experience and my personal opinion about it is, I think a lot of guys just, they have financial advisors, they have agents, but they choose not to listen. I remember having a conversation with a younger guy, just seeing him. He was an undrafted guy. He was, he drove a he paid 6 figures for his car. He was living in the city where we were playing, and then he had an apartment where he was from. And I remember telling him, I was like, listen, man, I was like, don't try to follow these guys over here making $1 million. You're barely making ends meet when you cut taxes and your finances that you have to pay for. And I was like, hell, if you're not going to listen to your financial advisor, pay me the freaking money, because you're not listening either way. So it's a huge problem that, unfortunately, some of the bad apples, take the bulk of the reputation of guys. But there's a ton of guys that in the National Football League, like you, that are some of my friends who are doing it the right way, man. And they do it quietly under the radar.
The question I want to ask you, because I'm one of the coolest things, honestly, when I started moving into finance world and, talking about my story, the largest group of people I started connecting with was football players, aside from skateboarding, of course, skateboarders, but from a career outward. And so I built up a relationship with a lot of guys. And some of them are doing really cool stuff in the finance world. Brandon Copeland, I talked to yesterday, right? He's like big advocate of financial literacy on his channels. So my question to you, I ask all of my friends are either in football or now kind of where we're at, are you seeing the change? And where are we at from a let's call it a 1 to 10 scale of impact we're making, and how much room do we have to grow?
Yeah, it's right. That's a really great question. And because I've been removed for almost 5 years, I still keep in contact with a lot of guys who play. And now my network of people are on the other side, right? And now when I wake up, I make phone calls and make emails to that community, right? Because I want to be connected with that, because for when you're playing the game, you don't really, your time is limited. And if you're a process guy like myself, when the season was over, I would take a month to travel, eat, drink, whatever I wanted, and then it was back to my routine. And I missed out on a ton of opportunities, Mikey, to go do internships and do this, do that. But in my mind, I couldn't compartmentalize. I was like, wait a minute, this thing is paying me an exorbitant amount of money. I don't know if I can handle doing a lot of different things at one point. But I realized, as being away from the game as long as I have, that culture wants you to think that way, and I think there's a small shift through social media and different platforms of guys understanding the value they bring to the brand of football. Now, on another scale, some of them are in it for different reasons. I think it falls, you play the back and forth game of fame as opposed to building a legacy and keeping what you made. So there's a huge gap, because you get a turnover of young guys. I was a dinosaur when I left the game. I was 33 years old, and I'm trying to talk finance or just try to direct this 22-year-old's attention towards saving their money, because you're one injury away from being out of the freaking league. And if you don't manage it now, you're going to look back 10 years from now. It's like, damn it, I should have bought that Range Rover when I was barely, I was moving from roster to roster, from city to city. Like, certain purchases is like, it's just stupid, So, but I do see guys like myself who are retired still communicating with these guys. There's guys like Rashawn Williams, who he started a company called Drive by DraftKings. There's a fund of former, current players, different investors from the top level, from the bottom level, getting into the business world. There's more of those things that are popping up that I think in the long run it will be better. But to say, right now, currently, things are moving in the right direction, yes, but there's still a long gap. There's still a big bridge to get over, man, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Again, man. Yeah.
I got another one for you because I got hit with this one yesterday. One of the best questions I was ever asked. And I want to ask it to you. You're on your deathbed, right? You're on your deathbed. 1 day left.
Yep.
And you have the people you care the most about in your room. And you can't give them anything physical. No money, nothing.
I like what
you only can tell them something. What do you leave them with?
I can only tell them something.
Yeah. Isn't that a good question?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I think for me, I would tell all the people, if I'm on my deathbed, all the people that I care about and love, I would tell them the feeling that you have right now towards me of love and the love that's in this room right now, I would say to share it with everyone and your life would be a lot easier. You know, I really truly believe, you know, just being good to everyone, you know, it brings me joy. I think it's good for the soul. Like right now, I have the community of friends that I hang out with. They have little boys and little children, and they're extremely blessed, right? And so we're in that weird age where from age 3 to 6, I want them to understand just how good they're living. So we're doing something. We're adopting a family for Christmas, and I want them to really get in the habit of giving as opposed to receiving. And so, and I would say that, you know, give more than you receive and you'll get a lot more in return, you know, and that's a really great question, man. And I think it falls in business, in life, and everything that, you know, when we wake up in the morning, hell, you know, your attitude, your positive attitude drives how that day is going to unfold, man.
That's right.
It's funny. I have a book behind me. The name of it is called It Takes What It Takes. And it's a friend of mine. He just passed away, unfortunately, about a month or two ago. He's a mental conditioning coach. And I was at a part of my career, I was in a funk, Mikey. Like I was spending money that I didn't have. I had been injured 2 years on injured reserve. I didn't think I was ever going to play again. And I made a deal with myself. Whatever I had done up until that point, I couldn't repeat it. So this guy, Trevor, who wrote this book, is forwarded by Russell Wilson. He sat me in his office and we actually made what do you call it? We were on a chalkboard and he asked me what the hell I wanted out of life. We wrote everything down and we laminated it. I put it on my mirror. I put it on my dashboard. Every time I woke up, I would see this thing, all the things I needed to do in order to, at the time I wanted to sign a big contract. And so we mapped out every day, every moment. Just when I would, and this was before I was married, when I would see women, when I would drink, we mapped every freaking detail out. And at that moment, I realized, it's like, man, your mental space, as much as we are gifted physically, what separates average from great and great from elite is up here, man, everything above the shoulder. So that for me has been a huge driving factor in my life. And Mikey, I appreciate you spending this time, man. I know you're a busy man. I appreciate your time and your energy and your perspective. I'm going to continue to follow you. If you haven't followed this man, go to IG at Mikey Taylor. He's got great content about finances and kind of brings you into how his day-to-day, you know, how he thinks from a financial standpoint. I think it's great for it crosses over to sports, to if you're not in sports, and it's just an even better story to tell because you were so elite at what you did on the skateboard, and now you're just as elite, if not more successful off the board. So I appreciate your time and perspective, Mikey. I really do.
I equally as appreciated to be here.
Hey, man. Thank you, brother. Thank you for joining.